Unlike Citroën, whose new C4 is no longer a hatchback, but a crossover type fastback thing because the previous model didn't sell, Peugeot didn't have the same problem with the 308. The previous generation sold over 1.3 million units, and Peugeot says that ever since it started selling 308 badged models, sales of this nameplate have racked up over 7 million units. And if you factor in the previous version, which was the 307, whose name was changed just to reflect a change of the times, but this is essentially a continuation of the 307 and the 306 before that, you're looking at tens of millions of vehicles sold. So this hatchback is quite an establishment in Europe. I mean, it's very popular not only in France, but across the continent. This third generation 308 brings some important changes to the 308 formula, although probably the most important is the way it looks, which I think is just spectacular. I think this is easily the best looking hatchback on sale today in Europe. I do also like the Toyota Corolla, but I think that this is more sophisticated and more premium feeling. The front end is typically Peugeot with this massive open grille, the new lion shield logo, which I'm not a huge fan of, I'll have to admit, although Peugeot has had just the head displayed on the logo and not the entire body of the lion before, although the last time it did this, it was 1970 something. So this is the first modern Peugeot logo with just the lion's head. And interestingly, it is the 13th iteration of the Peugeot logo. I'm not a huge fan of it. I prefer the prancing lion. We'll move to the side and I'll explain why. But Peugeot also did this for practical reasons because this hides the sensors for the radar cruise control system. It also has a camera here, or it should have a camera here. My Tesla doesn't have the 360-degree around view system, but if it did, it would have a camera here. Just like all new Peugeot models, this one has its name displayed on its front fascia. This is a retro touch that Peugeot also used to do back in the day, but I think it's very successful, it's very premium, and it makes this car highly distinctive, I think, if the design didn't already do that. The new 308 gets LED headlights as standard, but the higher trim level GT model that I'm driving today gets adaptive matrix LEDs with 24 diodes. And interestingly, while many vehicles do have different designs for their headlights depending on which version of headlights and how far up the range the vehicle is, in the case of the new 308, you actually get headlights that are a different shape. So these optional ones get this plastic element here, which is actually taken up by the headlights in lesser models, which also don't get this continuous strip of LEDs that run down the bumper. I'm not gonna call them fangs because that's just ridiculous. And they get like segments of LEDs in lower versions. But at least it's not a blank piece of trim like it is on the 208, for instance. I really like this front end. It's gorgeous. I like the creases that start here and continue across the hood. It's a very sexy front end, definitely. From the side, you can see how aggressive the front end of this vehicle is and how bulging the wheel arches are. I really like this. And as I was saying, maybe this is a bit of an uninspired moment for Citroën to change its logo from a lion head and body to just the lion head, because the French automaker has placed these badges here on the front fenders, exactly where you would find them on a Ferrari. And at least maybe they should have had the prancing lion instead of the lion's head. But that's just me. I also like the design of the mirrors. They flow out of the body and they are black in this vehicle and I think they look great. My Tester is the GT model, so it gets these additional inserts here. They are mini splitter things on the side of the bumper that go with this additional side skirt insert here. I think it looks really good. And interestingly, it doesn't go all the way to the back. It stops kind of in the middle of the rear door. But I still think it gives the vehicle, the GT pack, gives the vehicle the best look in my book. The wheels are the largest ones you can get on this vehicle. They range from 16s all the way to 18s. These are the 18-inch wheels with some plastic aero elements here, very interesting. Looking at this vehicle from the side, I really like the fact that there's a cohesion. So there's this crease here right above the bulging arch. It blends into the front light cluster, and then the crease starts to reappear here in the middle of the rear door, and then it also fades into the rear light cluster right above the bulging wheel arch. Now I like that. That's nice and consistent design. I also like the blacked out trim around the side windows and the tinted rear glass. This vehicle looks really, really good. From the back, the design continues to impress, I think. My tester has the more expensive looking optional LED rear lights. The standard one has 3 LED elements, but they are parallel to the ground, while here they are slightly slanted and they do look more fancy, and they have a nice light up animation. The indicators are a smaller strip of LEDs here, so none of these turn off when you signal your lane change or something. These are always on when the headlights are on. The nice font, the nice retro font for the 308 logo is present here. This is where you open the hatch from. It's not electric or anything fancy, but it works fairly well. 412 liters in there, by the way, or 1320 if you fold down the rear seats. I really like the design of the rear end, and I think this look lends itself very well for a hot hatch, which Peugeot might make, because I recently wrote about a rumor that Opel is considering making a hot hatch version of the upcoming electric Astra, which this is identical to underneath. So maybe Peugeot will launch an EV hot hatch based on this. It would be awesome, especially since the exhausts are already fake. So they are just some tacky ornaments that I absolutely hate. I do like the gloss black that's all around the vehicle. You don't get any unpainted plastic, which is pretty nice. Overall, I think this is a highly successful design. And thankfully, the same typically French outlandish design and flamboyance can be found inside. Let me show you. For the new third generation 308, Peugeot has increased the wheelbase by 55 millimeters. The previous model wasn't especially roomy in the back, and frankly, this one isn't particularly good either. To be fair, this is not in my driving position. This is all the way back because my tester has an electric front seat that moves back when you stop the vehicle. But even in my ideal driving position, I only have about this much between my knees and the front seat. And you can't really stretch your feet underneath the front seat either. Furthermore, another niggle I have is I think the backrest is a bit too upright. I would have liked a bit more of a recline. My tester is a top-of-the-line model, so it gets 2 USB-Cs here. There's also an armrest with cup holders and a place for your phone, nets behind the seats, and yeah, not a lot going on here. And since this is the GT line model with the black headliner, it all looks very sporty. I'm not gonna call it claustrophobic. It's sporty, definitely. In the driver's seat, you immediately notice the typical Peugeot steering wheel to gauge cluster ratio. So you get a small and squared off steering wheel, and the driver's digital display is placed above it, so you have to look over the wheel. I frankly cannot get used to this system, and I never really truly find an ideal driving position. However, the trade-off is you get a very nice and sporty feeling wheel, and I threw it around a few corners on this twisty road behind me, and it was really good. It didn't lean as much as I was expecting given how soft the suspension feels over bumps, and by that I mean it's quite comfortable. But the design is so swoopy and outlandish, and my GT tester has green stitching. It's all very nice, and the wheel has perforated leather on the parts that you grip. It feels really premium. So you get soft touch plastic here, where was it? Here as well, and on the top of the door cards and on the lower part of the door cards. In the back you don't get soft plastic, but somehow they've managed to match the texture, so it doesn't look shinier than in the front, the plastic I mean. The driving position isn't the lowest in class, but I don't think you could sit especially low with this type of gauge cluster setup. So I mentioned the fact that this car has a digital driver's display. It's a 10-inch display, but you can optionally specify a 3D component to it. So it's like an HUD, a HUD in front of the display. And there's actually another screen here that projects onto this screen, and the effect is undeniably 3D. The steering wheel is very small, but I like it. I would have just liked maybe for it to be a bit higher so that you could see the dials or the display, whatever, through this slat here, but you don't. My tester also has this aluminum-like material. I think it might actually be not plastic. It feels very nice, to be honest. Some more green stitching to let you know that you have a high-spec version of the car. The same door handles that Peugeot has probably been using for 15 years. I may be wrong, but they seem to be the exact same ones that I've seen in so many Peugeots. Behind the steering wheel, you have little paddles for changing gear. They are actually pretty good. I mean, they do fall easily to hand and you don't have to stretch your fingers to reach them. I also appreciate the fact that you no longer have an additional stock of buttons here and that everything has been moved to the steering wheel. So here you have the adaptive cruise control things, and here you control infotainment and media. You get this GT inscription here on the steering wheel. The door cubbies are quite big. You can fit a 2-liter bottle in there easily, and it will sit like this, so it will be angled that way. Moving to the center screen, you get this screen as standard in all versions of the 308, but what you don't get is this configurable set of shortcuts. This is an additional screen. This is a separate screen. Not sure if you can see it, but it's a screen, and these are configurable. You can put whatever shortcuts you want in here, and it actually works fairly well. So I can enable my seat massage, for instance. This is actually the first time I've done this, and it actually does massage you. I mean, it doesn't just inflate and deflate the lumbar support thing. It actually has things that prod you in the back. Exactly like the display says. Cool. So anyway, the screen itself, both screens, as far as I'm aware, are 10-inch screens, and both of them are standard. But like I said, for the gauge cluster, the 3D thing is optional, and this additional screen is also optional. The infotainment itself is very good. I really like the fact that Peugeot has finally fitted its vehicle with a very good backup camera. If you don't opt for the optional 360-degree camera system that puts cameras all around the vehicle, you still get this, which sees where you're going based on where you've been. So it uses the camera to create a top-down perspective, in other words. This is the selector for the transmission. It actually works pretty well. And I like that it doesn't have the same lag that I noticed in the Citroën EC4, a vehicle that's based on the same platform, I might add. You still get some toggle switches here, like for shortcuts, maybe climate. Am I doing something wrong? Ah, there you go. So you don't have to be in the camera screen for that to work. Climate, defogging, recirculation, and climate off. And I like the fact that the hazard warning button is red. This is a wireless charging mat for your phone. As you can see, it charges your phone. This is where you start the vehicle. You have 2 cup holders here that you can hide away. You have another cubby here where I have niftily stowed my sunglasses, and a 12-volt socket and the USB-C. This car also has, like I said, the optional USB-Cs here in the back. What was a little bit annoying at first, knowing that in order to connect to Android Auto or Apple CarPlay in this vehicle, you need a cable connection, and you kind of have to run the cables around the cabin. I don't understand why Peugeot didn't make this USB-C the data connection for Android Auto, because, let me show you with my other hand, with my strong hand. So you actually, there's a hole through here, and you actually poke a cable through, and you can actually charge your phone here. So you can charge your phone here and have it in this holder. The driver gets an electrically adjustable seat that you can even move forward and back from the button. You also get two memory positions, and this cushion for your thighs is manually adjustable. I keep it all the way out because I have long legs, and it really makes a huge difference on longer journeys. This is the mood lighting, the optional mood lighting, I think. Is there any on the dash? Apparently not, but there's some more on the door here. The passenger seat isn't as sophisticated as the driver's seat, so you don't get the adjustable thigh support. But these mid-range seats do have a very nice Alcantara insert here, and yeah, they look very nice and sporty, even though they aren't that supportive, to be honest. Overall, I really like this vehicle and I appreciate how it makes you feel. But let's get going and I'll tell you more about how it drives, because there's a lot to talk about there as well. My tester has the 1.5 liter diesel engine with 130 horsepower and 300 Newton meters of torque. You can also get a 1.2 liter 3-cylinder turbo with either 110 or 130 horsepower, and you can also get two plug-in hybrid variants with either 180 or 225 horsepower. I tried to find some performance numbers for this variant for the diesel that I'm driving today, but I didn't really find any. You can get it with either a manual 6-speed or an optional 8-speed automatic, which is what I have in my tester today. And you can also opt for the same automatic transmission on the higher powered 1.2 liter gas engine. You have selectable driving mode, so let's put it in sport and let's try to overtake this pickup truck. The engine is a 4-cylinder, it's quite refined. I mean, yeah, it's pretty quick, but it won't set your heart racing. I estimate that this is a 9-ish second car to 100 kilometers per hour, and probably its top speed is around 200 kilometers per hour, given that it has a drag coefficient of 0.28. This is the newest 4-cylinder diesel from Peugeot, and it's also supposed to be the most efficient. So you should expect this vehicle to use 6, maybe 7 liters on the combined cycle per 100 kilometers. The turning circle is also impressive, 10.5 meters, which is very good for a front-wheel drive vehicle. And it makes this car more maneuverable than rivals like the Golf or Focus or the Koreans. It is also worth noting that even though Peugeot does sell the two plug-in hybrid variants as being able to return under 2 liters per 100 kilometers on the combined cycle again, that's only if you charge their 12.4 kilowatt-hour battery pack, which should give a WLTP range of around 59-60 kilometers, which is still pretty good, but the plug-in hybrid is around 300 kilos heavier, and I'm sure the plug-in's extra mass does make it less fun around corners, because this, frankly, is very enjoyable. It does lean a little bit, but the front bites pretty well, I think. Maybe this could do with a set of more aggressive tires, because I do appreciate the steering because it is quick and precise and sharp and enjoyable. You can put the car in manual mode and play with the paddles to make the most of what little power and torque there is, to be honest. But you can also see the torque in action, so I put it in 8th at just under 100 kilometers per hour, and I'm going to floor it. It's pulling. And we're also going uphill. Yeah, it's a strong unit, definitely. And in manual mode, let's see if it gives me 3rd. It gives me 3rd at 93 kilometers per hour, which some transmissions from other manufacturers just don't. So let's see these tighter corners. You know what? I'm actually having fun in a diesel Peugeot. Let's see this tricky chicane. Oh yeah. Okay, so with some more aggressive tires, you can probably really hoon this around a few corners. I mean, Peugeot has decades of tradition of making fun to drive vehicles, and I'm happy to report that even as a diesel with an automatic gearbox, the new 308 is engaging. Let's try a launch. Not the most scientific because it's not flat ground, but I'm gonna give it a shot. So it's shifting on its own. It really short shifted there. and now we've hit 100 kilometers per hour. So 10-ish seconds, 11-ish seconds maybe. This car is based on the EMP2 platform, so it's the same as the Citroen EC4 that I drove not long ago. However, this certainly feels much more eager to turn and much more planted than the Citroen. It's also lower to the ground. It's 2 centimeters lower than the vehicle it replaces. And with this new generation of 308, there's also no longer a wheelbase difference between the hatch and the wagon variant. There's still a difference when it comes to total length, but the wheelbase is the same now. And it is slightly roomier in the back, as I demonstrated. And it also probably has an effect on the handling as well. It really grips. The engine itself, while you do hear it and you know it's a diesel, a 4-cylinder diesel, it actually does really, really well for NVH. That's noise, vibration, and harshness. Even when you work it hard. I'm going to overtake this bus. The gearbox is also quite smooth, although in lower gears, it's kind of dim-witted between first, second, and third. It's sometimes jerkier than you would want it to be. It's not as smooth as the best transmissions. Although you did see previously that it did give me a lower gear at quite high RPMs, and I can't not appreciate that, because it's so frustrating in many vehicles with automatic gearbox when you want a lower gear and it just refuses to give it to you. One thing I don't like about the driving experience is that even though the suspension is very, very well judged and it's slightly geared more towards comfort than sportiness, but it still doesn't ignore sportiness, I think it's very, very well judged. However, you cannot escape the fact that the rear is only a semi-independent setup. And while you don't feel it most of the time, you are reminded over some bumps that the two wheels are linked. And as much as I want to like the dials being placed above the steering wheel and you having to look over them, I mean, I think I know what Peugeot wants to do with this system. I cannot get used to it. I mean, I'm either sitting too high in my seat, or the steering wheel is blocking too much of the dials, or I'm too far away. I think I'm still a bit too far away for my liking, but it's something you have to get adjusted to, I think. So my Tester, being a top-of-the-range diesel, costs just over 30,000 euros. If you opt for the hybrids, they'll be closer to 40 before incentives and all of that. To sum things up, I definitely think that this is a thoroughly recommendable car. It's definitely the prettiest hatchback in its class. And even though it's not the sharpest to drive, it's still sharp enough. And it also feels like it wants to rotate around you in corners, the mark of a fun-to-drive front-wheel drive vehicle. It's practical, good-looking, it has a decent range of engines, it's not excessive, and there's no hot hatch, sadly. Although there might be one in electric form in the not-too-distant future, because Peugeot will eventually launch an all-electric version of this vehicle. And I hope it will have more power and torque than the EC4 that I drove. And apparently it will. And in the case of the hot hatchback model, which has been speculated about, it might have a dual motor setup, so maybe twice the power of the EC4 and all-wheel drive, and that might make things slightly more interesting. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't done it already, and I'll see you in the next one.